Did a chick, dumb a chum, did a chick, dumb a chum. What's up, Lobstrosities? You're in the Rybrary. I'm your librarian. No talking in the Rybrary unless you're a Lobstrosity. Today I'm going to be doing a special double review of the first two books in Stephen King's Dark Tower series, The Gunslinger and The Drawing of the Three. I swear this is not a Stephen King centric channel. He's not even one of my favorite authors or anything. I've just been on a kick since reading Night Shift, and I had copies of these first two books and figured I would check out at least The Gunslinger. And I really liked both of them. I especially appreciated that they're both very different books and showcase very different aspects of Stephen King's writing and his capabilities as a writer. And so I thought it would be great to do a double review and, kind of compare and contrast these two books. This is a spoiler review. I will be talking about the plots of these two books in detail, so if you don't want to be spoiled, here is your warning. So, The Dark Tower is Stephen King's 7-book long fantasy epic that he was partially inspired to write by a Robert Browning poem called Childe Roland to the Dark Tower Came, and also partly inspired by his love of Lord of the Rings and wanting to do his own kind of fantasy epic. I say this is a fantasy series, and it is. It's definitely that, but it's so much more than that. And one of the things that I appreciate so much about these books is that they defy easy categorization or classification under a certain genre. There's heavy Western elements. There's obviously fantasy. There's some sci-fi. It's really just an amalgamation of things that Stephen King loves, but it doesn't come across as him trying to Frankenstein together a bunch of genres. It feels very organic. It feels just like a Stephen King work. It doesn't feel like this or that particular genre, and it's really impressive, and I appreciate it for that reason. So the first book in the series is The Gunslinger. Just as an aside, I loved this particular version because it contains some amazing paintings by Michael Whelan. If you are familiar with fantasy and sci-fi in general, you'll know who Michael Whelan is. He's an artist whose paintings have graced the covers of tons and tons and tons of fantasy and sci-fi books, as well as album covers over the last 50 years. Yeah, and as you can see, there's some amazing paintings in here. So Stephen King started writing this in 1972, and it wasn't completed until a decade later in 1982. This is actually a fix-up novel of 5 short stories that were published throughout that time period. This is very much not what I was expecting. First of all, it's the most beautiful Stephen King prose I've ever read. Most of his writing is usually very prosaic and straightforward and digestible. This is very poetic, bordering on purple here and there. My appreciation for that kind of thing, varies from work to work, but this is just gorgeous. There were times when I was reading this where I was like, this could be my favorite book of the year based on just the prose itself. It's not, but in those moments I certainly thought it could be. It's also very mysterious and mystical and ambiguous in a way that just worked so well. I just loved the way that this portrays the world and the character of Roland the Gunslinger in a very enigmatic way. It was a brave choice, I think, for this first book in the series, because it's not super accessible and there's not a lot that you're given in terms of answers about what's going on, but it's so well done, and I loved it for just the stylistic elements, the atmosphere. So this book follows Roland Deschain, the titular gunslinger. He's known as the last gunslinger. We're not really told exactly what gunslingers are, other than they are, classic sort of Western archetypes who use guns. We get the iconic opening line from this: "The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed." which is such a great opening line. And really, that's like most of what you get in this book in terms of plot is a series of vignettes about the gunslinger and his journey to try and track down the man in black, who is some kind of sorcerer or something, and also his journey to track down the mythical Dark Tower, which he doesn't really even understand what it is or why he's chasing it. He just knows that it's his destiny to track it down, and he will go to great lengths to do so, as we'll see later in the book. The world that we see here is based on the American West, the classic Wild West, late 1800s, but it is not that. It's like something of a post-apocalyptic world. It's unclear if like this is our world in the future because there's references to stuff from our world. They reference Hey Jude a bunch. There's also like burgers and beer and stuff. So uh, it definitely has some elements of our world, but is not is doesn't appear to be our world or something. Roland throughout this book just refers to the state of the world as having moved on. The world used to be a thriving, prosperous place, and but has since moved on and is now kind of a desert, post-apocalyptic sort of wasteland. The story begins with the gunslinger spending some time in a small town called Tull and getting to know the people there. The picture that's painted of Tull is jives with the image that we're given of the world as kind of decaying and post-apocalyptic. After spending some time in Tull, the gunslinger comes to discover that the man in black has kind of corrupted the town. He has brought a man back to life as sort of his servant. So we discover that the man in black is something of a necromancer, and that he also has like a priestess that he's installed, and these forces kind of turned the town against Roland, and he ultimately has a shootout where he murders the entire town. He kind of just takes it in stride. He's not particularly bothered, and that goes to indicate what Roland is like, and that he's so single-minded in his quest to find the man in black and the Dark Tower that he's willing to do these kinds of things, even though it's in self-defense. People are attacking him, but he really just like slaughters everyone and doesn't really feel remorse about it. Roland then moves on and finds a way station where he finds a young boy named Jake. And Jake, come to discover, is from our world. He died in our world. He got pushed into traffic and got hit by a car and died, and woke up in this world. So we're now given the impression that this might be some kind of purgatory or hell or something, but still unclear. But this is the first of many connections that we will see between Roland's world and our world. Roland and Jake begin traveling together. They have some adventures. They meet an oracle who basically tells Roland that he will have to draw three, which he's unclear what that means, but that it is an important part of his journey. And he is also told that Jake will have to be sacrificed for the journey to continue. And he's not, happy about this, but seems to sort of accept it. So Roland and Jake eventually do. They travel to some mountains, and they do discover the Man in Black. The Man in Black kind of just is like waiting for him, and then makes sure that Roland and Jake see him before retreating into a cave, which leads into the mountains. This is a really interesting thing about this book and about the connection between Roland and the Man in Black. Is there seems to just be like a magnetic pull between them. The Man in Black isn't really trying to get away from the gunslinger. He's just kind of egging him on and leading him on, and the gunslinger seems to understand this and is just playing his part in following him. And this is such a mysterious dynamic between them, and it makes it so interesting because it's unclear what either of them is actually trying to do. It's just some kind of natural force that is drawing Roland toward him and keeping the man in black out in front. So Jake and Roland travel through the mountains and the dark caverns. They discover creatures called slow mutants, a further indication that there's some kind of post-apocalyptic thing going on here. We also get flashbacks to Roland's youth sprinkled throughout this, and we find out that he was maybe part of a noble family, and that he was part of a class of other gunslingers, and that gunslingers are something like knights in this world, just very highly skilled gun handlers, 6-shooter handlers that are, play the role of knights more or less. There's vague references throughout here to some kind of civil war, which might have brought on the world, moving on. Right before they escape the mountains, Jake, as has been prophesized, falls and dies, or we don't know if he dies, but falls into the black abyss in the mountains. I'm just thinking of it now, but this might be a nod to the death of, or the death of Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings. Jake, as he's about to fall and die, he, sort of accepts it, as does Roland, which adds to the mysticism and the ambiguity of what's going on here. Everyone seems kind of aware of their fates and their destinies here, and are just kind of doing what they need to fulfill them. It's a very interesting feel to the events. It all feels like very predestined. Finally, Roland comes out of the cavern, the large cavern system under the cave, or under the mountains, and finds himself at a fire with the man in black. This is the most trippy vision quest part of this book, and it's a great. I loved this whole part where he's just kind of being shown things by the man in black, using his sorcerer powers or something to show him things about the future and the past and his destiny. And then the man in black draws some tarot cards for him, and 3 of which are going to be relevant to what the oracle told him earlier about the drawing of the 3. Those cards are the Prisoner, the Lady of Shadows, and Death. After this, Roland goes unconscious and wakes up and is 10 years older, and the skeleton of the man in black seems to be sitting at where the man in black was sitting. Who knows what's going on at this point. The book ends with Roland heading down to a beach and just sitting on a beach and contemplating the rest of his journey to the Dark Tower. So the second book is The Drawing of the 3. It was published 5 or 6 years later, and this is a very different book, in tone, in the prose, in a lot of ways. This feels much more like a standard Stephen King book. The prose is much more prosaic. The characters are very well fleshed out and are great. The characters in this are awesome, but it's a very different feel than the first one. I honestly kind of was bummed a little about that initially. I really loved the ambiguity of the first one and the sense of mysticism that is difficult to pull off successfully in my eyes, but he managed to do it so well in that first book. So I was kind of bummed to get to this and then realize that it's, this is just a much more standard Stephen King book, but it's great none the same. I really liked this one also. The book picks up a few hours after the end of the first book, and Roland wakes up and is being attacked by giant lobster monster creatures that have come out of the ocean. That's why I was at the beginning of this video making those goofy sounds, because throughout this book we see the lobstrosities making these kind of sounds that are didachik, dumachum, didachik, dumachum. And I wasn't clear if the lobsters are supposed to be actually speaking those words, or if they're just making sounds that vaguely sound like them. I don't know what was going on, but it's a fun little piece of it. But yeah, so Roland wakes up is being attacked by he actually gets his fingers cut off, two of his fingers on his right hand cut off. He manages to stop the bleeding, but he starts to develop an infection fairly quickly. He knows somehow that he must head north along the beach. He heads along the beach until he finds a door standing in the middle of the beach, and knows that this is his first destination. And above the door is carved the prisoner. We know that this is the first of the three that he needs to draw, whatever that means. He opens the door and discovers that he is looking into a different world, and that world is our world. He's looking through the eyes of a character named Eddie Dean, a young man who is a heroin addict. He is a prisoner in that way. He is a prisoner to his addiction. Eddie is on an airplane. He is smuggling a bunch of cocaine for a drug lord in New York City where he lives. Plane is going to land in New York. Roland discovers that he can take control of Eddie if he needs to. He can also communicate with Eddie. Roland realizes that the staff on the airplane is getting suspicious of Eddie and tells him that he should hide his drugs in Roland's world because he can bring things between in and out of the door into his world. One thing I will say about this is that the way that the magic works with going through the door and bringing things in through the door and bringing people through the door is sort of unclear and maybe inconsistent in some ways. I don't think Stephen King is the kind of writer who necessarily cares a lot about having a super well-designed, super consistent magic system. That's just a minor little complaint. So he manages to help Eddie store these drugs and then helps him to deal with the crime lords that he is working for. Eddie's brother unfortunately gets killed in this confrontation with these drug lords. Eddie's brother is also a heroin addict, and he's obviously very affected by this death, but he ends up coming with Roland into his world, and the door closes when Eddie makes this decision, and then falls to the sand and doesn't seem to function anymore. As I said earlier, people just sort of seem to understand their destiny in some vague way in these books, and Eddie is no exception to that. He kind of implicitly seems to already understand that it's his role to go along with Roland and to go on this journey with him to the Dark Tower, although he doesn't know why or even what the Dark Tower is. So the two of them continue heading north along the beach. Roland manages to stave off his infection for a while with some antibiotics that Eddie brought through the doorway, but it quickly becomes apparent that it wasn't enough and that he's going to need more. So they arrive at another door, and this has the Lady of Shadows carved into the top of it. Roland then opens the door, and we see who the next person of the three that he's going to draw is, and it's a young woman named Odetta Holmes / Detta Walker. This is a young woman who is has a split personality. He attributes it to schizophrenia. This was in the 80s, so our understanding of multiple personality stuff is different now. So we now know that this is a different disorder called dissociative identity disorder, and schizophrenia is a separate thing. But this was a common, thing that was lumped in with schizophrenia at the time. So Odetta Holmes, the woman who was born in this body, is a young black woman living in the 60s, also in New York, in the mid-60s, right around the time of the civil rights movement. She is very well spoken. She's very rich. She's like an heiress. Two very seminal events have happened in Odetta's life. As a young girl, a brick fell on her head or was thrown at her head, which seemed to trigger the multiple personalities. And then, as an adult, she was pushed in front of a train and her legs were run over, and so she has no legs. So yeah, lots of stuff going on with Odetta. Her other personality is known as Detta Walker. Detta Walker is as different as possible from Odetta Jones. She's vicious and suspicious of everything and thinks everyone is trying to get her. So rather than spending much time in the world with Odetta, Roland kind of just drags her into his world, and they get to know each other, and Eddie gets to know her in Roland's world on the beach. Eddie very quickly, kind of falls in love with Odetta, but when she is Detta, he's understandably terrified of her because she's threatening to kill him constantly. Odetta and Detta are not aware of each other. Neither of them has any control over who is occupying the body at the given time. So we get scenes with Odetta and scenes with Detta. It's an interesting dynamic going on. Roland's fever is getting dramatically worse, and Eddie kind of has to pick up the slack and be responsible for both of them, since Odetta is in a wheelchair, and Roland has very little energy. He has to kind of help both of them continue along the beach, heading toward the third and final door. As they approach this third door, we're presuming that the third person that we're going to meet is the third of the three that is going to be drawn, and that these will be Roland's companions for his journey to the Dark Tower. But the third door, which has the pusher written above it, turns out to be not a companion for Roland, but an enemy, a man named Jack Mort. Jack Mort is a sociopath who likes killing and hurting people. It's described as him getting off on the thrill of altering the course of people's lives in a negative way. And that's an interesting way to phrase it, and kind of reinforces the themes that are sort of starting to appear in this series about destiny and the course of lives being shifted and that kind of thing. Roland ultimately kind of discovers that Jack Mort is the man who was responsible for not only killing Jake, the young boy from the first book, but also was responsible both for the brick that hit Odetta in the head as a young girl and created Detta, and also for pushing her onto the train tracks that turned her into a cripple. Roland sort of starts to realize that the purpose of Jack and the doorway to his mind is so that he can help Odetta and Detta sort of reconcile their existence and sort of come together and find peace. But before that, he has to get more antibiotics, and he uses Jack's body to get both antibiotics and bullets for his guns, which many of Roland's bullets have gotten wet over the course of the book and are misfiring, so he needs more bullets. So he uses Jack to rob both a gun store and a pharmacy, and there's some great action scenes here with Roland battling with cops. Meanwhile, Detta has taken control of the body and is going to kill Eddie, but she has tied him up and put him next to the water, and is expecting the Lobstrosities to finish him off. And she is going to then wait for Roland and kill him herself. But Roland successfully manages to show her Jack Mort and makes her realize what happened to her. And then she sees Jack Mort die by getting hit by a train, the same way that she was hit by a train. And this sort of causes her to reconcile into a new third figure called Susanna. And this is like the end of the book, so there's not much. It's not quite clear yet what the relationships will be like between Susanna and Odetta and Detta, because they all seem to be in one body now. So there seems to be three of them, and I think that this is the drawing of the three, and these are the three from the drawing of the three in question. And the book sort of ends with the three companions, Eddie, Roland, and Odetta, moving on and continuing their journey to the Dark Tower. So yeah, I really liked this book as well. This was, as I said, much more conventional Stephen King fare, but the characters of Eddie and Odetta were so good. I even really liked the character of Jack. I kind of wish that he would have been around more, because he's a great villain, just true, like, evil sociopath. it seems like there might be some kind of connection between Jack and the Man in Black, because in the first book it was suggested that the Man in Black was responsible for pushing the boy Jake into trafficking, killing him. But the Man in Black is not really referenced at all in this book, or it definitely doesn't appear at all. As I said, I was kind of a little disappointed, but I love this. I love the first one. I'm looking forward to checking out the series more. When I read a series, I usually don't actually read more than one book in a row. That's just not how I read. But I was so compelled after the first one that I decided to pick this guy up and check it out. And I'm really happy I did. And I'm planning on bumping this series up among all of the other series that I'm in the middle of, and trying to get to the next one in the near future, because it's very compelling. It's very original. It doesn't, like I said earlier, it doesn't feel like Stephen King is trying to do anything other than create his vision of what an epic fantasy quest would look like, and it feels very much like Stephen King. I respect Stephen King so much as a writer because he kind of just does what he wants to do, and kind of follows his heart, and you can see that in the differences between these books, and also the similarities between them. It really is a mark of how special of a writer he is. And those are my thoughts on the Gunslinger and the Drawing of the Three. I'm really looking forward to getting to the next one in the series. The next one in the series is called The Wastelands. So yeah, let me know what you think about the Dark Tower series, or Stephen King in general. Let me know what you thought about this double review. I really appreciate you coming into the Rybrary today. This was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to more cool stuff in the future for this channel. So yeah, take care.